Alright, this house in Everett, Washington recently sold for $445,000, and I'm going to be talking about what it would look like to buy this house for if you make $80,000 a year. Could you afford this place? Could you qualify for this house? Would you be able to buy this house if you make $80,000 a year? So I want to talk through what the monthly payment would look like on this place. I'm going to use two different scenarios and show you what cash is involved up front in those two different scenarios. I'm going to use a 10% down scenario and a 20% down scenario. And then for each scenario, I'm going to show you the monthly payment that would result given the current market, current interest rates. And then I'm going to talk through how qualifying works, because you can look at the monthly payment and decide whether that's something you are comfortable with, something you can afford. But you also have to figure out whether that's something you can qualify for, whether the lender will give you that loan. So I'll talk through how that works. All right, so here are two different quotes that I've made based on the two scenarios that I mentioned, one a 20% down scenario and one a 10% down scenario. And these are broad numbers. They're not going to be 100% dialed in, but they're going to give you a good picture of what would be involved. And again, these are based on interest rates that are a good estimate right now. This is the beginning of March. This is a pretty good estimate for where you'd be at, given the scenario that I'm assuming, but they're not going to be the exact rate you're going to end up with. So here are the two rates, and or here are the two quotes. Here are the two scenarios. One here you can see is at 20% down, and the other is 10% down. Now both of these, I'm assuming you are a first-time home buyer, which sometimes gets you access to a little bit better pricing in various ways. It can improve your pricing sometimes. And I'm also assuming a credit score of 740. Now, if you are a first-time home buyer and you are, you're above a really low credit score, you have good, decent credit, it doesn't really make a huge impact how high, how low it is, as long as it's in a reasonable range. If you are a first-time home buyer, but it does have somewhat of an impact, particularly on your mortgage insurance, which we'll look at in just a minute. So let's start with this 10% down scenario on the right. Let's look at the monthly payment, and then we'll talk about the cash that's involved. So you can see right away the monthly payment is $32.41. And the way that's determined is it's based on a $400,500 loan amount, and it is based on an interest rate of 6.999. And so the breakdown of this monthly payment is you have homeowners insurance of $150, you have taxes of $357, and both of those are going to be based on the house. They're not based on the loan amount, so it's going to be the same in both scenarios. Those are paid out of your escrow account. Those are paid through your mortgage typically. There are some exceptions occasionally. And then the other component is your mortgage insurance, which you can see here is $70 a month. And that's based on your loan amount. That's based on the down payment percentage you're able to reach. Because we're able to reach 10% down here, it's a pretty small mortgage insurance fee. But again, that is a fee you have to pay if you put less than 20% down when you get a mortgage. And it's based on the amount that it is based on your risk profile as a borrower, because it's intended to cover the risk that the lender is taking on by giving a loan of larger than an 80% loan to value. So then that leaves us with the last component of $26.64. So this number right here is going to be a key difference maker between the two monthly payments, because you can pretty quickly see, we'll look at it in a second, but on the left in the 20% down scenario, because you hit that 20% increment, that 20% threshold, you don't have to pay mortgage insurance. So again, that results in a monthly payment of $32.41. So look down here, there's a few other notes on this quote I want to point out. Points in credit. Now, points are a fee that you can pay to get a lower interest rate. They're a fee up front that you can pay to the lender to get a lower interest rate. There are various reasons you might do that. I'm not going to go through all that right now, but basically technically this is a credit of 128. Credit is the flip side of that, where you can take a credit from the lender towards your closing costs, where they will pay some of your closing costs to take a higher interest rate. So technically there's a credit of $128. Basically that's zero. That's as close to 0 points as I can get it, because lenders price out their rates based on certain rate increments, and this is just one of the increments that we're using right now. So basically that's as close to zero as we can get it. This number could be thousands and thousands of dollars. So you can see that's pretty much effectively zero. And then we look down at the other section I want to point out is other closing costs, which is $11,640. Other closing costs are, most of the time people are aware of this coming in. Sometimes people aren't. When you come to get a loan, you have to pay more than just the down payment. You also have to pay your closing costs. And closing costs cover a variety of things. They include both costs of getting the loan. You have to pay the various parties involved that are doing work to help you get the loan. That's included in closing costs. But then they also include what are called prepaids. And prepaids, there are a variety of areas of prepaids, but basically those are part of your monthly payment that are going to be included in your monthly payment. But typically when you get set up for a loan, you skip your first month's mortgage payment because the lender needs time to get you set up in their system so that they can take your payment. So a lot of those costs that would be included in your first month are then thrown into closing costs. So this includes both categories of that there. So closing costs plus your down payment of 10% on this $445 purchase price leads to a total cash to close of $57,250. So that is the 10% down scenario on $445,000 purchase price with no points and no other key major fees or anything. And again, this is a rough estimate, but that closing cost number is a pretty good estimate of where you're going to be at. It might be a little bit below that. It could reasonably be a little bit below that. It just depends on all the factors going into your loan. But usually in this price point, this loan amount, we're going to see in our area, in the greater Seattle area here, we're going to see something like that. Definitely $8,000 to maybe $12,000 range. It could be higher, it could be lower, but usually for this kind of scenario, it's going to be right in there. So as far as qualifying, we talked about seeing if you could buy this with an $80,000 when you make $80,000 a year. Looking at this monthly payment, that's something you're going to have to decide. Is that something that you're comfortable taking on when you make $80,000 a year? That's a budgeting decision. That's a finance decision. But as far as qualifying for the loan, there are specific rules that determine whether you can even qualify for this loan, whether your income is enough to qualify for this loan. So if the lender, so let's look at the rules that lenders use to determine whether you can qualify for a loan. The key metric that they use is what's called your debt to income ratio, your DTI. And your DTI is your total monthly debt over your gross monthly income. So it's your total monthly debt over your gross monthly income. And this number needs to be less than 50%. So there are some exceptions to that, where sometimes if you have other debts that take you slightly over 50%, you get to 50, 55, 56%, maybe even 57%. FHA will sometimes make a distinction between just your housing debt and your total monthly debt, and if those other debts take you over 50%, FHA sometimes give you a little wiggle room there. But for conventional, which is what we're looking at, that number needs to be less than 50% total monthly debts. So that's any other debts that you have, plus this new housing payment, and you add those together, credit card loans, student loans, whatever, and you divide that by your gross monthly income. That number needs to be less than 50%. One important thing to note about this number here, your gross monthly income, it's your gross monthly income, so it's your income before taxes. but it's your income in the eyes of the lender. It's according to their standards of what qualifies as income. So if you have variable income in any way, that sometimes the number that you rely on, the number that you use for your budgeting, doesn't line up with the number that the lender uses. So this number for qualifying needs to be a number that the lender can get behind. So if it's salary, then it's usually pretty straightforward. They just take whatever your salary is. If it's any other pay structure, then there's going to be some rules that they use to figure out whether that's a number, what the number is that they can use. So if you take that rule and you look over here, your total monthly payment is $32.41. So in order to qualify for that monthly payment for this loan amount, you would have to be making, if you take that rule of 50%, you'd have to be making at least $6,482 per month. So, if we take an $80,000 salary, I think that's 666. Let's see. Yeah, so an $80,000 salary is about $6,666 per month. So technically, you could qualify. You could probably qualify for this loan if you're making $80,000 a year. Again, if that's the number that the lender is using. So it's tight, but you could probably qualify for this. Affordability is another question that you're going to have to look at. Let's look at the 20% down scenario. So in this 20% down scenario, big thing to notice right away is just the difference in the total payment. You have $2,875 versus the $3,241. And there's a couple key reasons that is lower. One is you notice right away that there are only 3 components over here as opposed to the 4 over here. You don't have mortgage insurance. So that's a quick $70 a month that you're not paying in this scenario. And then it's also a lower loan amount. You have the same interest rate in this scenario. Sometimes getting up to a higher down payment can give you a lower interest rate. In this scenario with this loan product, it didn't do that. However, sometimes it can, but you have the same interest rate in this scenario for, again, basically no points, which if you miss the last one, points are a fee you can pay up front to get a lower interest rate. So no points, same interest rate. So the biggest difference is you're just paying interest on a lower loan amount. You're paying interest on $356,000 rather than $400,000. So your principal and interest portion is going to be a little lower. The taxes and the insurance are the same because those are based on the house, not on the loan structure. And then looking down again at closing costs are anything that you have to pay. They're a combination of 2 things. If you miss that, it's any costs involved in getting the loan, paying parties who help you get the loan, and fees to get the loan. And then the other component are prepaids, where usually you miss your first mortgage payment when you get a loan, and so you have to pay anything involved in your first mortgage payment. That goes into closing costs typically. So closing costs in this scenario are $11,424, and that plus the 20% down payment is a total cash all in of $101,534. So total cash all in this scenario, if you can make it to that point, that reduces your total payment, which gives you a little bit more room as far as qualifying, and definitely as far as affordability, as far as being able to take on this monthly payment. So again, if you look at our rule over here, where your DTI is your total monthly debt over your gross monthly income, and that number needs to be less than 50%. If that number needs to be less than 50%, and this is your monthly payment, $2,875, then let's see how my mental math is. That's going to be $5,500. Okay, I got that horribly wrong. Okay, so it's $5,750. Don't know where I got the $5,500. Okay, $5,750 per month is what you need to qualify. And again, if you're making $80,000 a year, that's $6,666 a month. And so you are safe as far as qualifying for this scenario. It gives you a little bit more wiggle room in this scenario because we got to 20% down. and it makes it a little bit more affordable to take on. Again, whether you are comfortable doing that is going to be a finance decision, a budgeting decision. But as far as qualifying for the loan, you would likely be able to qualify, assuming that your $80,000 in income does qualify in the lender's eyes. So if you want to get a real quote on a house you are looking at, or if you want to get a look at your income to see how much income would qualify, how much housing payment you could qualify for, please do reach out. My name is Landon Buteau, and I work with Cleveland Street Mortgage based in Bothell, Washington. We do loans in Washington and Idaho, but we also try to serve as advisors and not just as loan providers to be able to set you up for success. And so we'd love to work with you. Please do reach out. You can watch, there's a video linked in the description here about our process, about what it's like to work with us as a team. And if that is interesting to you, if our process looks like something that would be helpful to you, you can reach out. There's contact info linked on our website. You can call, text, email, or schedule a call.